Cliff Burton's death in 1986 is one of those moments in rock history that feels like time just stopped, a gut punch that left Metallica and millions of fans reeling. The band was in Sweden on their Master of Puppets European tour, riding high with momentum and their music taking over the world. Cliff, at just 24, was the long-haired, denim-wearing genius whose bass did not just play notes but roared, screamed, and growled like a lead guitar. He was not simply the bassist, he was the secret weapon, the man who turned Metallica's sound from raw thrash into something almost orchestral with his distorted riffs and classical influences. In the early hours of September 27th, fate took a cruel turn. The tour bus, barreling down the road near Ljungby in Sweden, reportedly hit black ice and lost control. It swerved, flipped, and in that terrifying chaos, Cliff was thrown through the window and pinned underneath. In the dead of night on a lonely Swedish road, Metallica lost their backbone, and the world lost a talent that had not even reached full bloom. What makes Cliff's story strike so deeply is how young he was and how much he had already achieved in such a short time. His bass solos were not background noise. They were events that often stole the show. Tracks like Anesthesia Pulling Teeth made listeners rethink what a bass could even accomplish in heavy music. He had this aura, a mix of quiet confidence and rebellious fire, as though he knew he was shaping something different in the world of metal. Cliff was also the band's moral compass in many ways, described by friends and bandmates as grounded, the one who could cut through chaos with honesty. He had won his place in Metallica through sheer talent, and had secured his bunk the night of the crash through a simple coin toss with Kirk Hammett. Ironically, that coin toss put him in the spot that led to his tragic fate. It remains one of those cruel twists that feels straight out of a tragedy, except this was no fiction but a devastating reality. The aftermath left the band shattered and unsure of how to move forward. There was talk of disbanding because replacing someone like Cliff Burton seemed impossible, yet in true metal spirit, they chose to continue. Jason Newsted was brought in to fill the role, and while he carried the music forward, Cliff's presence never truly left. For fans and the band alike, the thought of what might have been always lingers. If Cliff had lived, Metallica's sound might have evolved in even more daring and experimental directions, but that chapter will forever remain unwritten. His influence remains undeniable, woven into the very DNA of metal. Even decades later, fans travel to the crash site in Sweden, leaving flowers, pics, and messages as if it were a sacred ground of rock history. His legacy echoes every time Master of Puppets is blasted through speakers or whenever a bassist dares to push boundaries in his spirit. Cliff Burton may have left this world far too soon, but he left it heavier, bolder, and unshakably alive. His death marked a tragic end, but his legacy stands as pure immortality. In Ocala, Florida, residents say one woman turned their neighborhood into a nightmare. Her name, Susan Lorincz. And if you ask the families who lived near her, they'll tell you she was less of a neighbor and more of a tormentor, for reasons nobody could quite figure out. Lorincz seemed to have made it her personal mission to harass the children in the area. The very sound of kids laughing and playing in the street, something most would call the heartbeat of a community, was like nails on a chalkboard to her. Day after day, parents say she lashed out. If children rode their bikes down the block, Lorincz would come storming out of her home, hurling insults their way. If a ball bounced too close to her yard, she'd respond not with patience but with rage, shouting, flicking the kids off, and spewing words no child should ever hear. What should have been innocent summer evenings filled with chalk drawings and jump rope turned instead into a constant cycle of intimidation. Residents whispered about her behavior, calling her the Karen of the block, because she just couldn't leave the children alone. But things didn't stop at yelling and middle fingers. Neighbors alleged that Lorincz escalated her tantrums by throwing objects toward the children, anything to make her anger felt. For the kids, playtime came with fear. Parents had to warn their little ones to stay alert, to steer clear of her apartment, to understand that some adults simply didn't see them as children at all, but as targets for misplaced hate. And then came the day everything boiled over. The day her behavior claimed a life. Ajike A.J. Owens, a 35-year-old black mother of 4, was no stranger to Lorinc's harassment. Her children, like many others in the neighborhood, had endured the shouting, the insults, the flicked-off gestures. But when reports came that Lorincz had crossed yet another line, allegedly throwing objects at Owens' kids and lacing her fury with racial slurs, Owens had had enough. Like any protective mother would, she walked over to confront the woman face to face. Not to fight, not to threaten, just to stand up for her children and demand respect. But what should have been a tense conversation across a doorway turned into something unthinkable. Behind the front door of her apartment, Susan Lorincz armed herself with a gun. As Owens approached, seeking answers and accountability, Lorincz fired through the closed door. The bullet struck Ajik, fatally wounding her right outside the home her children had grown up fearing. In one violent act, a mother's life was stolen, 4 children were left without their mom, and an entire community was shattered. The tragedy sent shockwaves far beyond Ocala. To neighbors, it wasn't just about one fatal moment. It was the culmination of months of unchecked harassment. To them, it felt inevitable, like everyone had been watching a slow-motion disaster unfold, powerless to stop it. Owens's death became the grand finale of Lawrence's tirade, the final, irreversible chapter in a story that never should have been written. And now, Lorincz is facing criminal charges. Authorities, under pressure from a grieving community and national outrage, moved to hold her accountable. But the damage has already been done. A mother's life cannot be restored. 4 children are left to grow up with the trauma of losing their protector in the very neighborhood where they should have felt safe. Residents still describe Lorincz in the same way they did before. A woman who had it out for the kids, who couldn't tolerate joy, who turned play into danger. But now, her name is forever tied to something darker. She isn't just the woman who yelled at children in the street. She's the woman accused of taking Ajika Owens's life. The story has become bigger than Ocala. It's a flashpoint in the ongoing conversation about race, safety, and the weaponization of fear. To many, it's clear that if the roles had been reversed, if Owens had been the one behind that door, the narrative would have looked very different. But in this case, what the community is left with is grief, anger, and a demand for justice. Ajik Owens didn't go to that apartment with a weapon. She went as a mother, standing up for her kids. And for that, she paid the ultimate price. What started as petty harassment, a woman flicking off children for daring to laugh too loudly, spiraled into a deadly confrontation that ripped a family apart. And now, instead of hearing kids playing freely in the street, neighbors hear silence, broken only by the memory of what happened when one woman's hate turned fatal. It was October 8th, 2015, when Susan Rodriguez's relentless crusade for justice at her children's school turned into a night no one at Lincoln Middle in Boise, Idaho, would ever forget. At 43, Susan had become infamous within the district, the parent every administrator whispered about and every teacher dreaded. She wasn't just a mother. She was a force of disruption, thriving on confrontation, her voice booming through school hallways, her phone always ready to film the next scandal she could push online. What she called advocacy was, to everyone else, a one-woman performance staged for attention and control. That night she showed up nearly an hour and a half before the school board meeting, prowling the halls like she owned them. Before the chairs were even set, she cornered the principal, demanding an overhaul of the cafeteria's lunch menu and threatening to expose the truth to the media. She spoke loud enough for every parent nearby to hear, declaring the administration was failing their children, pointing fingers, drawing eyes. When reminded that the meeting hadn't even started, Susan didn't falter. She raised her phone, recording herself as she accused staff of covering up problems, her voice echoing through the hall like the opening act to a drama she had staged countless times before. But while Susan focused on her performance, she ignored the very real danger above her. The school was under heavy renovation, scaffolding stacked in corners, dust clinging to the air, construction crews working late to finish electrical upgrades. Directly over Susan's head, new lighting fixtures had been mounted into an aging section of ceiling tile, one that workers had already flagged as weakened. No one expected a parent to be standing there so early, and Susan, distracted by her own theatrics, never noticed the ominous creak in the ceiling above. At 6:20 p.m., just as she shuffled her papers and rehearsed her talking points for the board, the sound came. A low, sharp crack that silenced the hallway for a split second before chaos erupted. The ceiling tile gave way, and with it came a heavy light fixture crashing down from nearly 12 feet above. Parents gasped, staff screamed, but Susan had no time to react. The impact struck her squarely on the head and shoulder with brutal force, dropping her instantly to the floor. Her phone skittered away, its camera capturing only muffled shouts and frantic movement. She never regained consciousness. By the time paramedics arrived, she was fighting for her life, her skull fractured, her neck severely damaged. At the hospital, doctors worked relentlessly, but 2 days later, Susan's battle ended. Her final performance had played out in front of the very audience she craved, but the ending was one she could never have scripted. The investigation that followed was damning. Corners had been cut during the renovation, safety measures ignored, oversight neglected. Susan's death wasn't just a freak accident, it was preventable. Her family, broken and furious, turned their grief into action, forcing the district to confront its failures. Schools across the city shut down for inspections, safety codes rewritten overnight, new standards enforced with uncompromising detail. Susan Rodriguez had spent her life demanding change, though often for the wrong reasons. In the end, the very chaos she courted became the catalyst for something far larger than herself. Her story remains a chilling reminder of how easily control can slip away, how a single ignored danger can turn an ordinary evening into a tragedy, and how sometimes the loudest voice in the room is silenced in the most brutal way imaginable. Steve Prefontaine's story is one of those bittersweet legends that continues to echo through the world of sports. It was 1975 in Eugene, Oregon, a city that had become the heartbeat of American distance running, and Prefontaine was its crown jewel. Known simply as Pre, he wasn't just another runner turning laps on the track. He was a showman, a rebel, and a force of nature wrapped up in a wiry frame. At just 24 years old, he had already achieved stardom, filling stadiums with fans who cheered as if they were at a rock concert. He had charisma that extended far beyond the track, representing not only the University of Oregon, but also the new rebellious identity of American athletics. However, his promising life came to an abrupt and tragic end on May 30th, 1975, in a car crash that has remained as infamous as his incredible running career. That night began like any other post-meet celebration. Prefontaine had competed earlier in the day and later joined friends for a gathering where his magnetic personality shone as it always did. After midnight, he drove his 1973 MGB convertible through the winding and hilly roads of Eugene, a stylish car that suited his fiery image but offered little protection in a crash. After dropping off his passengers, he was alone when tragedy struck. The official account states that his car drifted across the center line on Skyline Boulevard, hit a curb, collided with a rock wall, and flipped, leaving him trapped beneath the vehicle. He died of traumatic asphyxiation, crushed under the overturned car, only blocks away from home. His blood alcohol level was reported to be 0.16%, more than the legal limit, and this detail shaped much of the public conversation around his death. Some accepted it as a case of drinking and driving, while others insisted that poor visibility or perhaps another car on the road might have forced him into a split-second reaction. Arguments over the true cause remain unresolved even today, feeding the aura of mystery that surrounds his final hours. What makes this loss feel even heavier is not only the way he died, but what he symbolized. Prefontaine was never content to sit quietly in the middle of the pack. He was a front-runner in every sense, both in racing strategy and in his approach to life. He challenged authority, fought for athletes' rights, and embodied a fearless spirit that inspired an entire generation. He also became an early symbol for Nike, giving the fledgling company its first taste of sporting identity. When he died, the running community lost more than a record setter. They lost a revolutionary voice who seemed destined for greatness beyond the track. His memorial, known as Pre's Rock, stands at the crash site and has become a pilgrimage spot for runners who leave shoes, medals, and notes in his honor. His death was tragic, yet his life remains an enduring lesson in living boldly and unapologetically. Prefontaine burned bright, raced hard, and though his story ended too soon, it cemented his status as an unforgettable legend whose spirit continues to inspire decades later. When people talk about Karens, they usually mean someone who throws a tantrum in a store, calls the cops for no reason, or harasses neighbors over petty grievances. But in Bedford, England, one Karen-level meltdown ended not just in embarrassment, but in death, destruction, and tragedy so shocking it rattled an entire community. Her name was Reena James, 43, and for years, neighbors said she had been locked in a bitter feud with the family living above her. The noise of their washing machine, the thud of early morning workouts, even the sound of children playing, things most people brush off, seemed to consume her. Instead of letting it go, she filed complaints to her landlord, to counselors, even to police, but nothing eased her anger. The more she stewed, the more the tension grew, until it exploded, literally. On July 4th, residents of Redwood Grove woke up to what would become one of the most horrific scenes in the block's history. At 9:30 in the morning, James armed herself with a hammer, smashed her way into her neighbor's flat, and poured petrol all over the surfaces. Then, in an act of sheer recklessness, she lit a naked flame. The explosion ripped through the building with a force so powerful it was heard half a mile away. Fire shot through the stairwells, windows blew out, and terrified residents leapt from upper floors to escape the inferno. Within minutes, the 3-story block was engulfed, and before long it collapsed into smoldering rubble. But the person who triggered it all, Reena James herself, never made it out. A neighbor tried desperately to pull her to safety, but the flames overtook everything. Her body was later discovered in his flat, burned and broken, a grim end to the chaos she had unleashed. 3 others were rushed to hospital, including a firefighter who inhaled thick smoke and a resident left with leg injuries after leaping from the burning building. For survivors, the memory of that day is burned into their minds. The deafening blast, the walls shaking, the frantic screams as people clawed their way to safety. At the inquest, the coroner called her death a misadventure. But to many, it felt more like the final act of a Karen crusade gone horrifically wrong. What started with petty complaints over noise spiraled into a fiery act of vengeance that ended her life and destroyed dozens of others' homes. Neighbors who once rolled their eyes at her constant grievances now shudder at the memory. The woman who couldn't stand the sound of kids playing upstairs or a washing machine running at dawn ultimately went out in the most destructive way imaginable, by setting her entire block ablaze and perishing in the very inferno she created. This wasn't just another Karen incident caught on camera or ridiculed online. This was the deadly extreme of what happens when entitlement, obsession, and rage mix together with fire and gasoline. And so, Reena James's story now sits among the most horrific ways Karens have met their end. Not with a quiet fade, but with a bang so loud it shook an entire town, leaving a legacy of ash, rubble, and a cautionary tale that won't soon be forgotten. It was June 22nd, 2016 in Phoenix, Arizona. Whitney Collins had no idea she was walking straight into her own demise. At 35 years old, standing just over 5 feet tall, she wasn't just a middle school vice principal. She was the embodiment of authority gone unchecked. Every part of her life revolved around control, confrontation, and capturing it all for the internet. Her red Honda Civic wasn't just transportation. It was a mobile stage, outfitted with phone mounts to record the meltdowns she engineered for her TikTok account, where nearly 8,000 people tuned in daily to watch her berate fast food workers and retail staff. That morning had already been a victory lap for her brand of chaos. She had suspended 3 students for attitude problems, humiliated a parent who dared question her methods, and posted a self-righteous video about teaching respect to the next generation. But Whitney didn't stop at her school. She carried her authority like a weapon, wielding it in drive-thrus and checkout lines, forcing teenagers and minimum-wage workers to crumble under her laminated credentials and viral threats. At one McDonald's location, she was infamous, a storm that staff dreaded seeing pull up. 2 young employees had already lost their jobs after her recordings made their way to corporate. So when she rolled into that drive-thru around lunchtime, phone already streaming, the staff braced themselves. Jake Martinez, just 17 years old, nervously told her the ice cream machine was broken. That single line was all it took. Whitney's face twisted into fury. Her voice sharpened as she leaned into the camera, telling her followers she knew lying teenagers when she saw them. Her chat lit up with laughing emojis and words of encouragement, fueling her rage like gasoline on a fire. Then came the move everyone expected, the one she was infamous for. She threw open her car door, leaving her Civic idling in drive, and stormed toward the towering electronic menu board. Live, loud, certain she owned the moment. She pounded her fists against the metal structure, shouting threats, name-dropping her position at the school, screaming about incompetence and consequences. And then, with her audience urging her on, she made her fatal mistake. She began shaking the menu board violently, each motion rattling bolts already weakened by desert windstorms. The sway was subtle at first, but it grew with every hit, every pull. Whitney didn't notice. She was too focused on Jake, too consumed with blaming him, too locked into the high of an audience egging her on. And then the impossible became inevitable. The metal giant groaned, tilted, and toppled. In one horrifying instant, the structure slammed down on her back, crushing her against the slow-rolling bumper of her own car. The sound was sickening. Ribs shattering, spine snapping, organs collapsing under 200 pounds of steel. Her live stream didn't miss a second. Viewers watched in stunned silence as her screams turned into gasps, her rage twisting into a final chilling stare of blame at the terrified teenager who had done nothing but tell her the truth. Jake quit the job that day, scarred by what he had witnessed. For weeks, he couldn't sleep, haunted by the image of Whitney's last breath. Investigators later discovered that behind the camera-ready persona, Whitney's conduct at school was already under scrutiny. Parents had complained, students had documented encounters. Her death, horrifying and grotesque, became something larger than a freak accident. It was a symbol, a grotesque warning about entitlement, obsession with viral fame, and the danger of believing authority makes you untouchable. Because in the end, Whitney Collins didn't just lose her life, she was crushed by the very performance she lived for, and her audience, the same people who cheered her on, could only watch as the ultimate Karen moment turned into the ultimate Karen tragedy. Harry Chapin, the celebrated singer-songwriter known for heartfelt hits like Cats in the Cradle and Taxi, lived a life dedicated not just to music, but to making the world a better place. On July 16, 1981, tragedy struck that life abruptly. Chapin, only 38 years old, was driving his Volkswagen Rabbit on the Long Island Expressway in New York, heading to a free benefit concert at Eisenhower Park in East Meadow, a testament to his lifelong commitment to charitable causes. What should have been an ordinary afternoon for a man devoted to his craft and philanthropy became the day the world lost him. Chapin had activated his emergency flashers and slowed to roughly 15 miles per hour, weaving between lanes, when his car was struck from behind by a semi-trailer truck. The impact caused the vehicle to burst into flames. Passers-by and the truck driver were able to pull Chapin from the burning car, but despite their efforts, he was airlifted to Nassau County Medical Center and pronounced dead at 1:05 p.m., with internal bleeding identified as the primary cause. The circumstances of his death have remained somewhat uncertain, with speculation that a heart attack may have occurred either before or after the collision. Complicating matters further, reports indicate that Chapin's driver's license had been revoked due to previous traffic violations, a detail that underscores the tragic unpredictability of the event. The aftermath of Chapin's death saw both grief and legal action. His widow, Sandra Chapin, filed a negligence lawsuit against Supermarkets General, the owner of the truck involved in the crash, and ultimately secured a $12 million judgment. Rather than using the settlement for personal gain, Sandra Chapin redirected it toward charitable causes, including the Harry Chapin Foundation, continuing the humanitarian work that had defined her husband's life. This act not only preserved Chapin's legacy, but also highlighted his lifelong dedication to social causes, particularly his efforts to combat hunger. In many ways, the continuation of these initiatives after his death is a testament to Chapin's influence beyond the world of music, showing that his impact on the world would endure even after his untimely passing. Chapin's death was a profound loss to both the artistic and philanthropic communities. Musically, he left behind a body of work defined by storytelling, empathy, and social awareness. His songs captured human emotion and experience in ways few artists manage, and they continue to resonate decades after his passing. In addition, his humanitarian work, particularly his advocacy for feeding the hungry, has left an enduring mark. Honors such as the renaming of the Lakeside Theater at Eisenhower Park to the Harry Chapin Lakeside Theater and the posthumous Congressional Gold Medal awarded in 1987 reflect the breadth of his influence. Ultimately, Harry Chapin's life and tragic death serve as a reminder of both the fragility of life and the enduring power of compassion. Even in the face of sudden loss, his music and humanitarian legacy continue to inspire, demonstrating that a life committed to creativity and service can leave an indelible mark, far beyond the fleeting span of years. For Jasmine Thomas, it was supposed to be just another day at work, a job she had been faithfully doing for nearly a year. She drove down Bellerive Drive in Aiken, South Carolina, on her way to care for a hospice patient, the father of Josh Herring. Jasmine wasn't there for drama or trouble. She was there to do what she always did, provide comfort, compassion, and care to a family in need. But what should have been a quiet start to her shift turned into a terrifying ordeal that she'll likely never forget. As she pulled up to the familiar home, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The neighborhood was calm, the kind of place where you'd expect to hear birds chirping or see kids riding bikes. But that peace shattered in an instant. Out of nowhere, a white man stormed up to her car, his fists balled and his face twisted with anger. He didn't walk, he charged. And before Jasmine could even process what was happening, he was at her driver's side window, pounding on the glass like he was trying to break it down. The sudden violence jolted her. Her heart raced as the thuds of his fists echoed through her car. Unsure of what to do, she cracked the window, maybe thinking she could calm him down, maybe hoping he just wanted to speak. But the second the glass lowered, his rage exploded. As seen in the TikTok video Jasmine later posted, the man swung at her, his arm darting through the gap in the window, fists coming frighteningly close to her face. What happened next was pure chaos. Jasmine tried to open her door, perhaps to step out and defend herself, perhaps to escape, but the man wasn't having it. The police report later confirmed what the video showed. He grabbed her door and began slamming it against her over and over again, the heavy metal crushing into her body as she struggled to keep her footing. The sound of the door clanging shut, her cries of protest, and his shouts filled the air in a disturbing display of violence. "You don't belong here!" he screamed, his voice sharp, venomous, and dripping with hatred. Those 4 words weren't just an insult. They were a declaration that in his eyes, Jasmine, a black woman doing her job, had no right to exist in that space. And he didn't stop there. Between his wild swings and slamming the door, he spewed slurs at her, calling her out of her name, even hurling the word "bitch" with such force it cut through the chaos like a knife. The irony was staggering. Jasmine did belong there. She had been caring for the family's father for a year, showing up day after day with professionalism and compassion. She was a trusted caregiver, a steady presence in a household facing loss and grief. Yet, in that moment, all of that meant nothing to him. In his eyes, she was just someone to attack, someone to demean, someone to try to erase with fists and fury, and the danger was very real. Every time he slammed that door into her, every time he swung his fists, he wasn't just trying to intimidate, he was trying to hurt her. He didn't care about her safety, didn't care that she was there to work, didn't even care that his actions were being filmed. His rage had completely consumed him. Thankfully, the video evidence didn't lie. Jasmine's TikTok captured the assault in shocking detail, showing the world exactly what she had endured. Viewers were outraged, horrified that something like this could happen to a woman simply arriving at her job. The comments poured in, demanding accountability, demanding justice, and justice did come, at least in part. The man was arrested and charged with third-degree assault, a small but significant acknowledgement that his behavior wasn't just anger or a misunderstanding. It was violence. It was hate. It was an attack that could have ended far worse. For Jasmine, though, the scars go beyond the physical. The humiliation of being told she didn't belong, the fear of having a stranger's fists come at her, the trauma of being crushed by her own car door. It's something that lingers long after the headlines fade. She wasn't just attacked. She was dehumanized in broad daylight, in a neighborhood where she had every right to be. Her story is more than just a viral TikTok clip. It's a chilling reminder of how quickly everyday moments can turn dangerous when bias and rage collide. It's proof of how fragile safety can feel when someone decides to weaponize hate. And it's a testament to Jasmine's resilience that she had the courage not only to survive the assault, but also to share it with the world, ensuring that what happened to her would not be buried in silence. It was September 8th, 2018 in Atlanta, Georgia. Rush hour traffic clogging Interstate 75, the kind of morning where tempers already ran high. For 41-year-old Danica Wells, though, this wasn't just traffic. It was her battlefield. She wasn't just another driver behind the wheel of a black SUV. She was a corporate compliance officer who carried her job title like a badge, turning highways into her own personal court. Her vehicle was rigged with dash cams, custom horns, and decals that screamed authority, as if that gave her the right to enforce rules no one asked her to. Her entire life in confrontation. She had 3 citations for aggressive driving, countless videos of her berating other motorists, and a LinkedIn page full of self-righteous posts about teaching respect. That Friday morning had already fed her power complex. She'd fired 2 employees, ranted online about accountability, and swallowed prescription stimulants she wasn't prescribed, fuel for her already explosive personality. Now, with the highway stretching before her, she was on the hunt for a target. She didn't have to wait long. A compact Honda merged in front of her SUV, perfectly legal. But to Danica, it was insubordination. Her rage erupted instantly. She slammed her horn, flashed her high beams, and pressed so close to the Honda's bumper it was a miracle they weren't touching. Her dash cam rolled, capturing her performance as she cursed into the camera, ranting about proper merging and holding people accountable. But tailgating wasn't enough. Danica pulled up alongside the Honda, still flying at 75 miles per hour, window down, body half turned as she screamed through the glass. She gestured wildly, swerving dangerously close, her voice sharp with venom. To her, this was justice. To everyone else, it was lunacy. The other driver, terrified, tried to keep steady as Danica's SUV loomed like a predator ready to strike. What she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was the line of stopped traffic ahead. Construction cones, warning signs, concrete barriers, all clear, all obvious. But Danica's tunnel vision locked her onto the Honda, her ego too swollen to notice she was seconds from disaster. And then it happened. Her SUV slammed into the concrete barrier at full speed, the impact echoing like an explosion. 4,000 pounds of metal launched into the air, flipping violently. Once, twice, 3 times. The vehicle crashed back to earth upside down, mangled beyond recognition. Inside, Danica's body was whipped like a rag doll, her spine shattered in multiple places, her skull cracked against the roof. Her organs tore from the sheer deceleration, crushed under twisted steel. By the time rescuers reached the wreck, she was gone, lifeless, broken, her seatbelt and authority both meaningless against the physics she ignored. The dash cam never stopped rolling. It captured every scream, every wild gesture, every second of her fatal obsession. When authorities released the footage, it went viral instantly. People saw exactly how her aggression led to her death. The same platform where she had once boasted about accountability now mocked her. Comments flooded in. Compliance, Karen couldn't comply with traffic laws. The driver she terrorized survived, but not without scars. They needed counseling to cope with the memory of watching someone's rage explode into a fatal accident right in front of them. Danica's employer was dragged into the spotlight too, her history of abusing power laid bare. The company scrambled, instituting anger management training and new rules for compliance officers. Danica Wells died trying to enforce rules on everyone else, blind to the fact that she was breaking the most important one, survival. Because in the end, concrete barriers don't bend for authority, no matter how loud you scream. Roland Ratzenberger was the kind of racer who chased his dreams with the intensity of a kid chasing the ice cream truck on a hot summer day, and in 1994, he finally made it to Formula One. Now, F1 isn't exactly the place for a laid-back Sunday drive. It's high-octane chaos, metal screaming around corners at speeds that make most of us feel queasy just watching. Roland, an Austrian with a heart full of determination and probably a caffeine addiction rivaling a coffee shop's monthly sales, joined the Simtech team, a scrappy little outfit in the grand theater of Formula One giants. His first few outings had been humble, but he was hungry, and Imola was his chance to shine. The San Marino Grand Prix wasn't just any weekend, it was where legends raced, and as fate would have it, where the course of racing history would twist dramatically. Qualifying for F1 races is basically a stress test for both driver and car. You're hurtling around a circuit, hugging curves like you're in a high-speed dance-off, trying to shave milliseconds off every lap. Roland was pushing hard on April 30th, 1994, on the Villeneuve Straight, his car slicing the air, engine roaring like a dragon that had just discovered energy drinks. But the universe can be cruel, and the Simtech wasn't exactly a fortress of invincibility. Earlier, the front wing of his car, basically the thing that keeps your car glued to the track instead of flying off like a giant paper airplane, got damaged when he hit a curb. Most people in that situation would pit, check the damage, maybe mutter a few colorful words and calm down. But Roland, ever the optimist, thought, nope, let's see what this baby can still do. He stayed out, pushing the car to its limits, believing that maybe, just maybe, a miracle lap was still possible. And then the tragic inevitability happened. At over 300 kilometers per hour, the weakened front wing gave way. Physics didn't negotiate. It simply reminded everyone that speed is not something you can argue with. The car shot straight into the concrete barrier. 1 second, Roland was there, controlling his machine with skill and guts, and the next, the crash was over. Emergency crews rushed to him, but the damage was catastrophic. Roland Ratzenberger, who had spent his life chasing dreams in fast lanes, didn't survive. The news hit the F1 world like a meteor. It had been 12 years since the last driver died during a race weekend, and the shockwaves were amplified by the fact that this was just the prelude to one of motorsport's most infamous weekends. What followed was a sobering wake-up call for the entire sport. Ayrton Senna's death the very next day overshadowed Roland's tragic end, but Ratzenberger's loss wasn't forgotten by those who understood the fragility of life at 300 kilometers per hour. Safety measures in Formula One, which had always been evolving, suddenly went into overdrive. Tracks were redesigned, Cars strengthened, and the drivers' helmets and suits became something that could survive what used to be unsurvivable. In a weird way, Roland's brief time on the grand stage became a catalyst for change, a reminder that the thrill of speed comes with consequences, and that even a small team with a big dream can leave a lasting mark. Roland Ratzenberger wasn't a world champion. He didn't have podiums lined up like trophies on a shelf, and his career stats don't look impressive on paper, but in the hearts of motorsport fans, he embodies the relentless spirit of a racer, bold, daring, and unafraid to chase glory, even when the odds are stacked impossibly high. Imola 1994 reminds us of the fine line between triumph and tragedy, the thin thread that separates victory from disaster, and the kind of courage it takes to live and race without holding back. In the end, Roland's story isn't just about a crash. It's about a dreamer who refused to slow down, who chased his passion at the very edge, and who left the world forever changed, both in memory and in the safety of the sport he loved. His name may not fill highlight reels, but his legacy runs deep in the veins of Formula One, a quiet testament to determination, bravery, and the fleeting brilliance of chasing a dream at full throttle. It was supposed to be one of those wholesome, picture-perfect mornings at a Florida elementary school, a kindergarten graduation where tiny kids dressed in paper caps beam proudly at their parents, and families gather to celebrate the milestone of moving up from crayons to cursive. Parents had their phones out, grandmas had tissues in their hands, and teachers tried their best to keep the event running smoothly. But instead of a simple, joyful ceremony, what unfolded in that auditorium could have been ripped straight from a reality TV reunion brawl. And at the center of it all, a full-blown Karen meltdown that escalated so wildly, it didn't just ruin the mood, it turned dangerous. The trouble began with something so small it was almost laughable. Seating. Yes, seats. A handful of folding chairs lined up for parents and family members to watch their little ones walk across the stage, but apparently one white woman, already giving off the stiff posture and tight-lipped energy of someone ready to pop, decided that she, and only she, had a rightful claim to a particular chair. That was her hill to die on. Seated nearby was a black mother, holding her young child, just trying to enjoy her kid's moment like everyone else, but Karen couldn't stand it. Instead of brushing it off or asking politely, she began fussing loudly, her voice cutting through the sweet background chatter of kids giggling and parents clapping. What should have been an innocent dispute about who sat where quickly turned into a public tirade. Witnesses say the woman's tone was sharp, venomous, and laced with entitlement. She leaned in, pointing her finger, her words dripping with disdain as she berated the black mother, loud enough for everyone within a 10-foot radius to hear. People shifted uncomfortably, teachers tried to intervene, but Karen wasn't backing down. She had decided that this was her stage now, and then came the moment where things went from embarrassing to downright dangerous. With her child still in her arms, the woman lunged. Yes, she actually threw hands while holding her baby, swinging and shoving at the black mother as if this kindergarten graduation had turned into an underground fight club. Gasps rang out from the crowd. Children screamed. One father, who happened to be standing nearby, nearly got caught in the scuffle as Karen flailed recklessly, putting his safety in jeopardy. In a split second, what started as words nearly turned into someone being seriously hurt. The black mother, clutching her child, tried to shield herself while Karen continued to press forward. She could have dropped that baby, one shocked parent was heard saying. And worse, her erratic movements sent a row of chairs toppling backward, almost striking a black man who had been recording the ceremony on his phone. Witnesses say if he hadn't stepped back quickly, he could have been hit in the head, trampled, or worse. Karen's outburst wasn't just rude. It put lives at risk in a room full of families and little kids. By this point, chaos had taken over. Teachers rushed to pull the women apart, children were crying, and the whole celebration looked more like a scene from a viral fight video than a school milestone. Parents yelled for someone to call the police, and within minutes, officers were on the scene, trying to de-escalate the madness. Even then, Karen reportedly kept flapping her gums, still furious, still insisting she was the victim in the story she had written in her head. Instead of celebrating the kids, people were left talking about that crazy lady who decided to throw a tantrum and nearly turned a school event into a tragedy. One witness summed it up best. She was reckless. She didn't care who got hurt. She had her own baby in her arms, and she still decided to fight. She put that child in danger. She put the other mom in danger. She almost knocked into that man behind her. It could have ended way worse, and that's the real kicker. This wasn't just about a seat. It was about control, entitlement, and a woman so blinded by her own self-righteousness that she couldn't see the chaos she was creating around her. She risked lives, embarrassed herself in front of an entire community, and scarred what should have been a milestone memory for dozens of families, all because she couldn't let go of a chair at a kindergarten graduation. When the cops finally diffused the situation, the room was left in stunned silence. Parents whispered, kids asked questions no one wanted to answer, and the memory of that day became etched not for the children's achievements, but for the shocking display of rage from one woman who simply could not control herself. And so, what should have been a sweet send-off for Florida kindergartners will now forever be remembered as the day Karen showed her whole tale and nearly turned a graduation into a crime scene. It was November 11th, 2015 in Seattle. The city's glow feels almost festive, with Black Friday chaos creeping into every store. But for 44-year-old Erin Lockhart, it wasn't about family shopping trips or holiday deals. It was about power. She wasn't just a luxury real estate agent with platinum blonde hair and a Mercedes parked outside. She lived to remind everyone that she was above them. Her business cards boasted million-dollar sales like badges of superiority. Her Instagram was a running diary of mocking poor people, and her followers cheered her every time she humiliated someone in public. To Erin, entitlement wasn't a flaw. It was her brand. That morning had already been a victory lap. She'd filmed herself ridiculing families waiting outside Target, berated a Starbucks barista, and even uploaded a video where she lectured a pregnant woman about shopping etiquette. By the time she arrived at Whole Foods after a champagne brunch, phone in hand and live stream rolling, Erin wasn't just shopping. She was hunting for content. Her signature tactic was simple: block anyone she deemed unworthy from accessing premium items, using her heels, designer clothes, and cutting tone to turn grocery aisles into her personal arena. And then she saw it. The last organic turkey. The Rodriguez family had reached for it first, their elderly grandmother carefully clutching the frozen bird. But Erin swooped in like a hawk, sneering into her camera as she berated them, focusing cruelly on the grandmother's broken English and slow movements. She shouted about being a premium customer, declaring that families like theirs didn't deserve the same products she did. Her followers ate it up, the comments scrolling as they urged her on. When Mrs. Rodriguez refused to let go, Erin's entitlement ignited into full-blown rage. She yanked at the turkey with one hand, gripping her phone with the other, determined to film her dominance. Her voice grew sharper, her movements more erratic, until her designer heels betrayed her. Backing up recklessly near the olive oil display, tipsy from brunch and drunk on ego, she stumbled. The shelves gave way. What followed was pure chaos. Glass shattered as bottles of olive oil crashed to the ground, one shelf toppling into the next in a chain reaction. Shoppers screamed, ducking as metal racks collapsed and jars exploded across the aisle. In the confusion, panic surged. Customers thought they were under attack. And then came the stampede. Erin was at the center of it all. Trapped beneath the fallen shelves, her body tangled in broken glass, she was swallowed by the terrified rush of people desperate to escape. Feet pounded over her chest, crushing her ribs, puncturing her lungs. A shard of glass tore through her carotid artery, spraying blood that mixed with spilled olive oil, creating a gruesome pool around her struggling body. Still, her hand clutched the turkey, the prize she refused to let go of even as her life drained away. Her phone kept recording. Every gasp, every scream, every final twitch was captured and uploaded in real time. By the time paramedics reached her, it was too late. Blood loss had already claimed her. They tried for 20 minutes, but her body was beyond saving. The aftermath was as brutal as her death. 3 customers ended up in the hospital. The Rodriguez family was harassed online by Erin's followers, needing police protection until accounts were shut down. Security footage of the incident went viral, exposing the cold truth. Her own arrogance had caused the very stampede that killed her. Whole Foods scrambled to implement new safety measures, reinforcing shelving and revising crowd control policies. Meanwhile, her real estate firm cut ties immediately, uncovering a long trail of discriminatory behavior that stained her reputation. Albert Camus, the celebrated French philosopher, author, and Nobel Prize winner, met a tragic and sudden end on January 4, 1960, in a car accident near Villeblève, France. At just 46 years old, his life and career were abruptly cut short, leaving the literary world and philosophical circles in profound shock. Camus was a passenger in a Simca 1300, driven by his friend Michel Gallimard, the nephew of the renowned publisher Gaston Gallimard. The car, traveling at high speed along the quiet French roads, suddenly skidded and collided with a tree, killing Camus instantly. Gallimard survived the initial impact but passed away a few days later from the injuries sustained in the crash. The suddenness of the event, a moment of ordinary travel turned fatal in seconds, made the loss even more striking, particularly as Camus was at the height of his intellectual influence, having recently won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1957 and published some of his most enduring works, including The Stranger and The Plague. The accident, while officially considered a tragic mishap, has sometimes been the subject of speculation, with conspiracy theories suggesting external forces due to Camus' political stances. However, historians generally agree that the crash was a tragic accident, the result of speed, road conditions, and the inherent unpredictability of life. Camus' death served as a harsh reminder of the fragility of human existence, the very theme he explored so profoundly in his philosophical works. He often reflected on the absurdity of life, the tension between humanity's search for meaning and the indifference of the universe, and in an almost cruelly ironic twist, his own death mirrored these themes, a sudden, unexpected end to a life defined by contemplation of mortality, ethics, and the human condition. The world mourned the loss of a thinker whose works challenged conventional thought and inspired reflection on freedom, responsibility, and moral integrity. His absence left a void in literature and philosophy that could never truly be filled, but his writings continued to influence generations of readers, scholars, and writers, standing as a testament to the enduring power of ideas even after the loss of the individual who conceived them. In this sense, Camus's death is not only remembered as a personal tragedy, but also as a moment that highlighted the fleeting nature of life and the unpredictable forces that shape it. The car crash that ended his life remains a historical point of reflection on both the randomness of fate and the enduring significance of human thought. While the details of the accident are grim, the high-speed collision, the sudden loss of life, the grief of friends and family, the legacy Camus left behind endures far beyond the physical moment of his death. His work continues to provoke thought, inspire inquiry, and remind humanity of the delicate balance between life, death, and the pursuit of meaning. In losing Camus, the world was deprived not only of a brilliant mind, but of a voice capable of articulating the tension between human hope and the indifference of existence, leaving behind a life's work that continues to challenge, educate, and resonate decades later. This Karen might not have lost her life, but she certainly put another man's life at risk with her tantrums. It was late at night, the kind of quiet evening when most people just want to head home, kick off their shoes, and settle into peace. Real estate developer Deich Jenkins had just returned to his house, a home he had worked hard for, a home he shared with his wife, a home where he should have felt safe. But that night, instead of a calm arrival, he found himself at the center of a scene straight out of a nightmare. As Jenkins pulled up, headlights fading, he noticed movement at his front door. A white woman with her 2 children in tow was frantically pressing his doorbell, pounding on the door like she was fleeing some unseen danger. His wife had already stepped forward, answering the door with confusion written across her face. Jenkins, being the kind of man who doesn't ignore someone in distress, approached carefully, asking the question anyone decent would ask, "Do you need help?" But instead of a thank you, instead of relief, what came next was pure chaos. The woman's eyes widened as though she had just seen a ghost, or more accurately, the villain she had invented in her own mind. Without hesitation, she turned on him, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. She didn't see a neighbor. She didn't see a husband coming home. She didn't see the owner of the very house she was pounding on. No, what she claimed to see was a stranger, a threat, someone who didn't belong. "You don't live here?" she allegedly spat, her voice echoing through the night. And then came the scream, sharp, panicked, and deliberately loud enough to pierce the silence and draw attention. "Help! Help!" she cried, weaponizing fear against a black man standing in front of his own home. In that split second, Jenkins' life was put in danger, not from anything he had done, but from the lies spilling out of this woman's mouth. History has shown us how quickly things can spiral when a black man is falsely accused. All it takes is one neighbor calling the police, one trigger-happy officer arriving on the scene, one misunderstanding, and suddenly what was supposed to be a quiet night at home could turn into tragedy. Jenkins knew it, his wife knew it, and yet this woman either didn't care or didn't think. Jenkins's wife immediately tried to defuse the situation, stepping in with calm but firm words explaining that yes, this was their home, yes, this was her husband, and no, he was not some intruder. But the woman was already lost in her own panic-fueled performance. Soon, her husband arrived, confusion plastered across his face. Now Jenkins and his wife had to do the unthinkable. Prove to strangers that they were not a danger in their own space. Imagine that, being forced to justify your very presence inside the home you bought, lived in, and loved. Your wife is mistaken, Jenkins and his wife explained. We live here. This is our house. I am not a threat to her. But even as they laid it out plain as day, the damage had already been done. The implication was there, loud and clear. A black man's existence in his own neighborhood was somehow suspicious. His presence alone had been enough to trigger accusations that could have cost him everything. Social media, however, wasn't having it. Once word of the encounter got out, people unleashed a tidal wave of backlash. They dragged the woman across every platform, holding her accountable for the reckless scene she created, and the criticism cut deep. So deep, in fact, that the woman herself went online in a tearful Facebook Live, her mascara running, her voice trembling as she attempted to apologize, but even her apology came wrapped in excuses. Between sobs, she insisted she hadn't profiled Jenkins, that she hadn't meant harm, that she hadn't intended to make it about race. Yet her actions spoke louder than her shaky words. She hadn't asked questions. She hadn't paused to consider the truth. She had gone straight to the dangerous accusation that a black man didn't belong where he was, that his very presence was a threat. The internet saw right through it. Commenters pointed out the obvious. If Jenkins had been white, would she have screamed for help? If Jenkins had been white, would she have accused him of not belonging? If Jenkins had been white, would his wife have had to explain, like a defense attorney presenting evidence, that no crime was happening here? The answer was clear, and that's what makes this incident so chilling. It wasn't just an argument at a front door. It was a textbook example of how quickly black lives can be put at risk by false accusations and weaponized fear. Jenkins did nothing wrong. He was simply returning home. Yet in the blink of an eye, his safety, his dignity, even his life hung in the balance because someone decided to scream instead of think. The apology may have been public, but the damage was private, personal, and lasting. Jenkins and his wife were left with the knowledge that, in their own neighborhood, at their own front door, they weren't seen as homeowners or neighbors first. They were seen as suspects, and all it took was one woman's baseless fear to turn a peaceful night into a potentially deadly confrontation. It was July 4th, 2019 in Miami. Fireworks cracked in the distance. Families gathered around grills, kids splashed in pools, and the air was supposed to feel free, celebratory. But for 39-year-old Natalyia Brooks, Independence Day wasn't about freedom. It was about control. At just 5'3", she ruled her suburban neighborhood like a miniature dictator, armed not with weapons but with HOA violation forms, a golf cart rigged with cameras, and a Facebook group called Violation Reporting, where over 200 residents lived in fear of being exposed. To her, being HOA president wasn't community service. It was a throne. That morning had already been a triumph for her power trip. She handed out citations for excessive decorations, filmed kids for noise violations, and ranted online about neighbors destroying property values. By noon, wine in hand and drunk on authority, she spotted a line of parked cars outside the Johnson family's pool party. To Natalyia, it wasn't a holiday gathering. It was an unauthorized threat to her rule. She grabbed her clipboard, straightened her business suit, hit record on her phone, and stormed over like a sheriff ready to make an arrest. This was her routine. She would barge into people's lives, scream about rules, and then pull her signature intimidation move, walking backward, never breaking eye contact, as if her glare alone could force submission. And it usually worked. Parents folded, teenagers looked away, neighbors gave up. But that day, her performance turned deadly. Natalyia shoved through the Johnsons' gate, clipboard raised like a badge, shouting about illegal gatherings and parking violations. Families froze mid-burger bite. Children shrank back as she filmed their faces, declaring she ran this neighborhood. Her voice bounced across the pool deck as she strutted toward the water, heels clicking, clipboard waving. But then she made her fatal mistake, stepping onto the slippery stone, coping at the pool's edge, still walking backward, still locked in her dominance routine. The surface was wet, slick from children's splashing. Her leather heels slid. In a heartbeat, her balance vanished. The clipboard flew from her hand, and then came the splash. Her body hit the deep end hard, suit and shoes instantly turning into anchors. The fabric dragged her down before she could scream. Her arms flailed in panic, hands clawing at water that gave no grip. The clipboard bobbed beside her, mocking her authority as she sank deeper. At first, party guests thought it was another stunt, another dramatic attempt to scare them. But seconds stretched into minutes, and her thrashing grew weaker. By the time anyone realized she wasn't acting, it was too late. Over 3 minutes underwater, her lungs filled, her chest convulsed, and her body went limp beneath the surface. Emergency responders pulled her from the bottom, still clutching a crumpled wad of violation forms, the ink dissolving into unreadable pulp. Her death rippled through the neighborhood, but not with grief. Behind closed doors, people admitted they felt relief. Relief that the constant harassment, the surveillance, the threats, all of it had finally ended. The Johnson family faced no consequences. The party was perfectly legal. Natalyia had been trespassing. The HOA dissolved her position immediately. The Facebook group that once fueled her tyranny was shut down after members began celebrating her downfall. And the state itself took notice, passing reforms to curb the unchecked power of HOA presidents. Natalyia Brooks thought she could rule her neighborhood forever, but on that holiday meant for freedom, her obsession with control dragged her to the bottom of a pool, turning her clipboard and her power into nothing more than waterlogged fragments.